Any conflicts of interest? Right.
Board member of the Mandible Sports Club, so for the grant application, conflict of interest, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Ray.
I'm a committee member of the Mandible Bowling Club.
Right. The current register of interests. Somebody move that we receive the current register of interest for information. Nikki, thank you. Seconder. Mark, thank you. Any discussion? Right. All in favour? Wendy, did you want to say something?
Just clarification, please. I've got here that I'm a partner of the Oxford Fate, but we will be closing that down shortly. So I'll just have my name taken off there when we've finalised it.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else?
Yeah, I just emailed Thea over the weekend just to say I completely forgot about it, that I'm the chairperson of the Oxford Community Trust. So that's the only change I have.
Okay. Thank you. All in favour of receiving that? Against? Carried. Thank you. Moving on to the confirmation of minutes. Minutes of the Oxford-Ohoka Community Board from the 4th of March. Somebody move that they be accepted as true record, please. Thomas, thank you. And Shirley, thank you. All in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Matters arising from the minutes.
I was just wondering if we had any update from some of the things that were talked about, like the speed limit concerns and the Oaks Reserve. And one thing that we haven't heard back from in a while is the Canterbury Landscapes development and how that's going with their fire management plan, because I'm sure the residents will be keen to see something before summer rolls around again. But yeah, that was the only ones I had.
Okay. Shirley.
Just about the walking and cycling strategy, did a member of the Oxford Promotions be included in the group of people?
I've got no information on any of those. Chair, have you?
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Yes, in terms of the report that served in front of council, there was a member included of the Oxford Promotion group.
In regards to the Oaks Reserve, are you talking about the Oaks Reserve and the potential dog park reserve? I believe that there was a submission which was put forward by the board to the annual plan, and staff's response, I believe, was that we would continue to work with the Oxford-Ohoka Community Board on a more detailed concept plan and bring that back to the council as part of the long-term plan for consideration for funding.
Thank you, Chris.
Sorry, Mr. Chairperson, in terms of Canterbury Landscape, Unfortunately, I have no feedback, but I will make sure that members get feedback by the end of the week. I'll speak to Matt and just follow that up for you.
All right, thank you. Moving on, there are no deputations or presentations. And have we got any adjourned business? No. Right, moving on to the application to the Oxford-Ohoka Community Board's discretionary grant. One from the Valdez Charitable Trust. In fact, there's two from the Valdez Charitable Trust, one or the other. And one from the Mandeville Sports Club, and one from Oxford Alpine Taekwondo Incorporated. Is there any discussion on these?
With regard to the grant applications, through you, Mr. Chairperson, I want to remind people, in June, the board still has a considerable amount of funding left if they wish to allocate. The financial year ends at the end of June, so this is the last month if they want to allocate that funding. I have requested information from the finance department if they will be carrying the funding over. They have not come back to me yet with that regard. I just wish to point out in terms of the Valdez Charitable Trust, they apply to all the community boards. Two of the community boards have already turned down the trust for various reasons. Yes, and then also in terms of the Taekwondo Club, the application, they were going to have the South Island Championships this year, but unfortunately it was postponed, but they will be hosting the championship next year, so they will still need the uniforms for next year's South Island Championship. And the Mandeville Bowling Club applications are straightforward. And the Mandeville Club one as well. Yeah. Thank you, sir.
Okay, anybody want to discuss any of those?
Just wondering how you're going to deal with them, because if you do them en masse, I'm not sure how Ray and I can be involved in, but we have the right to vote on the other ones outside our conflict of interest. Just wondering if you clarify how you would like to deal with the applications.
I'm quite happy to do them individually, and probably the best way to do it because of your both conflicts of interest.
Thank you. The first one, Valdez Charitable Trust, is that just a new organisation that's come in? Is it because we've already got a why suicide that runs in the Waimakariri? So can you just help me, Chris? Can you?
Yes, I can. We've received applications by this trust to each of the boards. I asked Tessa Sturley, who manages our community team, to do some investigation into the trust to find out whether or not they were currently in connection with why suicide in the Waimakariri and with our suicide prevention network. She says that she hasn't been able to contact them. She's tried, and also Nicola and her team has tried, and also the chair of the suicide prevention network has also attempted to contact the trust, and they've left messages on have left messages and haven't received information back. From the information that they've gathered on the Facebook page, they don't believe that they are connected to the network that we currently have in the Waimakariri district, and the recommendation from Tessa is that we wouldn't provide them with funding at this stage.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you. I noticed that they're actually based in too in the North Island, and they've really got no connections with the North Canterbury. I believe we are serviced well enough in this, and I would not vote for it.
Thank you. Yes, Nikki. All right.
Just a quick question. Do we know why the other two community boards decided to decline here?
Chris, you know.
I'm not 100% sure. I wasn't at those meetings, but the information which has been provided at the moment is that we would be a test, essentially, and would be one of two places that they're looking to trial what it is that they provide. And we have a current suicide prevention network and a network of social service providers in our district, which is well connected and do a reasonably good job at the moment. Suicide prevention is something which has to be done right. There's a lot of risk in providing a service in suicide prevention which isn't aligned with best practice, and we're not currently aware of whether or not what is being on offer here is actually following best practice in suicide prevention. So there are some risks around providing funding for it in North Canterbury. So I'm not answering your question, but I'm giving you some more background.
Thanks, Chris.
The answer to the question is exactly like Chris said. They felt that there was not enough information available on the programs that the trust will be implementing, and the board also felt that there were enough organizations within the Waimak district to actually deal with suicide prevention. That is the two main reasons why they decided to not grant the funding.
Nikki.
Yeah, I did do a little bit of research on them and found their Facebook page, and also obviously read their application. And I have reservations as well. Whilst it's a lofty goal that, you know, it's a worthy thing that they're trying to do, just like has already been said here, I feel that we already are well served by what we have here in the district now that is well connected with our community services team. And reading through their application, I find it a little bit confusing as to how they wish to go about achieving their goals. So being that they're not based here at all, they're based in the Manawatu, and that, yeah, we're just going over ground that we already have. I'm probably inclined not to support this either, in spite of the fact that it's such a worthy thing to do. But yeah.
Okay, having got the information we've had, somebody like to make a motion as to what we do here? Oh, Mark, sorry.
Given the feeling around the room, I was actually going to move the motion that we decline the request for funding for this organisation.
We got a seconder? Ray, thank you. All in favour? Against? Carried, thank you. Moving on to the Mandeville Sports Club. Any discussion or questions on that one? Shirley?
Thank you. I'm just questioning. I think it's a great idea for the sports club to have it. We've got a lot of these machines in the waimakariri. So how do they actually fund their batteries and their pads and that? That's my question.
Maybe Mark or Wendy can answer that.
This is why they've come to us, because they don't have it in their budget to do so. They thought that when they got them from the Red Cross would come and renew them, but that's not the case at all. And everybody would be all in the same boat that have these, I would imagine.
Yes.
It's a bit of a game, isn't it? We do have some in our community facilities as well, and the ones in our community facilities, we pay for the cost of changing the batteries in those. So we have one in the Rangiora Town Hall as an example. I think we have one in this building and our libraries as well. So we look after the cost there. Of course, the Mandeville Sports Club, it's their own building and they lease the site and are responsible for that one particularly. They get a grant for maintenance, but the grant for maintenance doesn't cover in this case the AED which they've got within the club.
Can I just ask a further question then, Chris? Could it be incorporated in their costs in future rather than having to come to the board for funding? I think it's a great idea, and it's not a lot, but it seems that every 4 years they're going to have to ask for funding to do the batteries and the pads.
The Mandeville Sports Club do come to council on an annual basis and ask for additional money to meet the costs that they have for maintaining Mandeville sports fields for the community. They have come as part of this annual plan and every annual plan since I've been here. They do lease the site themselves though, and there are some things which the council doesn't provide cost for, and those are generally sports club rooms which sports clubs have for themselves, and where it's not a building which is looked after by council, we don't provide the funding for the AEDs inside those buildings as well. So I don't know of other AEDs. I could go on the app and have a look for you, but there will be others in other community facilities which are owned and operated by community groups, and they are responsible for getting funding for that. So they may come back here and ask for funding in the future, but they may also go to other funds, other community external funding providers and ask them as well. So.
Right, any further? Thomas.
This might be probably more a question for Wendy or Mark, but they're asking for 620. Where are they getting the extra $200 for their request that they need to fund it? And because our maximum amount's only $500, would it have an impact on them if they only received $500 from us?
I think probably that they would manage it in their budget round. It's just I can't because we haven't been to a meeting lately, but since COVID-19, their supply has dried up as well. But I'm sure that they'll may be able to. Well, they'll have to, because you've got to have it going.
I think in the application it states they've got $200 sponsorship from another group in the application. But Wendy's right, since the COVID-19 hit, I mean, the main source of income that the club gets is through its bar and restaurant, and that dried up substantially. The club is working through a strategic plan, which is in terms of part of its marketing and probably long-term sponsorship activities that might be covered down the track. The only thing I would add in is that, remember, this is available to the whole Mandeville community. It's not inside the club room, it's actually on the outside of the building, so it's available for the entire community to use 24/7 as well. So.
Through you, Mr. Chairperson, I would just want to remind the board members that 500 is just a guide. So if you wish to give them the whole 620, you are allowed to do that. 500 is not a limit placed on the board. It is just the usual amount to guide the board.
I was just going to say, if we're ready, I'd be happy to put a motion to that, if everyone's happy. Would be that we support the full amount of funding for what they're asked for. Do I need to give a reason why? No.
Nikki to seconder. I'll make the comment that during last year, we gave 2 or possibly 3 amounts of money which were over 500, so it's not that we can't do it. Okay, so
Just regarding this application, Chris did say just before that he doesn't know how many we have in the district, and I do kind of get the feeling that the question that's on the top of people's minds is, well, if we grant this, will everybody else come at us? Well, actually, I don't think there are that many AEDs in our ward. And if Mandeville came back to us every 4 years, I don't see that as a problem. It's an additional source of funding for them. They serve a huge portion of our community. And pretty much just about everybody that lives in Mandeville, Swannanoa, Ohoka area and further afield probably makes a trip there at least once a week, 40 years or 40 weeks of the year. So I have absolutely no problem in supporting this. And also, Thomas, I was just doing the math there. If they've received a $200 grant elsewhere, that the cost for the pads and the batteries exclusive of GST does come up to $620. So that's where the math all went. So, I have absolutely no problem in supporting this, and I hope you will too.
thank you, Nikki. Right, we'll take a vote. All in favour of that motion? Against? It's carried. Thank you. And we move on to the Oxford Alpine Taekwondo Incorporated application. Is there any discussion on that?
In their application, they actually asked for funding for their uniforms, but then they also said that it could be also used for equipment that they may need. So I'm just wondering what they're actually going to be spending the money on.
I would make the comment that most martial arts clubs, the participants provide their own uniforms, not the club. Any further discussion?
Do we actually know, when they say uniform, are they talking about gis? Because that's what usually is provided by the individual. Are they talking about like a tracksuit or something, or does anybody know?
Looking at what they've done for premium apparel, which is here, and they are track pants with branding and hoodies with branding and t-shirt with branding. So, yeah, I mean, it's about 3,000 something or other. So they're only wanting a smaller pelt for it. Yeah, yeah. Which and just thinking back other times that I know that the Oxford Netball Club used to get uniforms, and I think Ohoka did and things like that. So it's not a new thing that.
And I think in the application they mentioned that there's a national tournament about to happen in Oxford, which is going to be very big, I guess, for the area. And I think their application for funding goes some way to at least have the club members looking like a team worthy of hosting a national event.
Thomas, did you have something to say? Shirley.
As I've said, I am concerned because their wording says they haven't decided whether it be for uniforms or other equipment that they need to purchase. So I think we need to, in our recommendation, actually mention it should be for uniforms.
Is there any requirement for them to say if they don't receive the full amount of funding for the uniforms, will it just subsidise the uniforms, or will they use it for something else, maybe?
I can't answer that.
So, I think if we request that it has to be used for that, then that is what they have to use it for. If they don't use it, then they do have to pay it back. It's as simple as that.
Right. Thomas, you want to do your motion?
Yeah, I'm happy to move that we give them $500 to be spent on club uniforms.
Thank you, Shirley. All in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Now we move on to the, what are we moving on to? The Mandeville Bowling Club. Is there any discussion on that one?
Yeah. This club works very hard to improve their property. They do a lot of work. They're a very proactive group. They it's not very often that I ever see them coming and looking for anything. That most of it they do themselves. So they're a very proactive group.
Any further discussion?
Am I able to say something? No. Yeah, the Mandeville Bowling Club is actively trying to promote the sport in the district. It's only one of two bowling clubs that are in our ward, and find it very difficult given that there is no school for a start off that's associated with the bowling club. They do hold 2 to 3 times a year invitations to people in the district to come and have a go at the sport of lawn bowls. They do have a number of bowls already that have been donated over many decades, and the thought was to try and encourage more members to come along and play. They'd need to have more modern bowls, and so they're looking at upgrading their backup collection of bowls. They do have a large number of tournaments, and probably the most popular every year is the ladies tournament, and it's very difficult to actually get into that particular tournament because it's always well and truly oversubscribed, mostly by Christchurch City bowling members who just love coming out into the countryside. And we're only 7 minutes away from the border, if you like. So it's an area that's becoming well liked by all the neighbouring bowling clubs as well, and we're just looking at trying to help in the promotion of the sport.
Thank you for that information, Ray. Sarah.
On a slightly off topic on that, it's a very close relationship with the Woody End Bowling Club, and their Year 7/8s go once every term, I think. They might rotate, whether it's Year 7, Year 8s, and they go and do bowling and have a little in-house competition. So maybe the Mandeville Bowling Club may be worth them approaching Ohoka, Swannanoa schools to see if they would like to start up such a thing too. They may get some form of funding, I think, through that as well. But a really great initiative from Woody End.
Right, thank you. Somebody like to put a motion on that? Oh, sorry. Mark.
I'd like to move the motion that we accept their application for the full amount of funding they've applied for.
Sarah, you can be the seconder. Thank you. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Right, moving on to the ratification of the board's submission to the Waimakariri District Council's annual plan. Mark, again.
I was wondering, Mr. Chair, whether you can give the board a bit of an update of how our submission went and what the response was, generally the feeling, really insights that you gained from the submission.
The insight I gained was Zoom. I've had no feedback and I have no idea. But it was very awkward doing it on Zoom, I can tell you.
I guess the question I was asking was, did the councillors ask many questions of you from the board in terms of our submission? Was it you just talking and them just nodding and moving on to things presented? Were you questioned on anything, any particular part of our submission?
I'll be quite honest with you, I can't remember. There were some questions, but not very many.
I don't have the minutes of the actual meeting where where it was presented, and I only know off the top of my head what the response was in relation to the Oaks Reserve, but you will receive responses reasonably soon from the council regarding your submission.
Okay. So, Shirley.
Chris, can you comment on the barbecue for Ashley Gorge?
Yes, I can. Sorry, I just couldn't remember all of the different points and different submissions. I believe that the response was that it would be appropriate for the Ashley Gorge Reserve Advisory Group to work with the Oxford-Ohoka Community Board to look for funding through their general landscaping budget. So you would expect that they will be coming to this board seeking funding through the general landscaping budget for a barbecue in the reserve.
But we actually put the submission in, and I understand that there are the electric barbecues in other reserves and the council has actually paid for them. So why should the Ashley Gorge one be different?
We have lots and lots and lots of reserves throughout the district, and the council supplies a limited number of barbecues for those reserves. We've had requests in the past for barbecues to be put in various reserves, and the council hasn't provided funding for those. We, at the moment, are looking at our budgets in terms of the effects of COVID-19 and what capital items that we can spend to enhance those reserves, and it was felt by the council appropriate to ask the board to look for funding through their own general landscaping budget as opposed to providing extra funding for a barbecue in Ashley Gorge Reserve.
Haven't we relinquished our landscaping budget?
I believe you've relinquished the landscaping budget for the next financial year, but you've carried over the existing landscaping budget, which you haven't actually spent a huge amount of. So you've got the current year's landscaping budget, which will be carried over into next financial year. And as the amount you have left in that is $13,490.
We aren't, because the Oaks Reserve Dog Park is going to look into the long-term plan, we're not going to be needing to take money out of our landscaping budget to help fund that.
I mean, that project's a tricky one. The board identified $9,000, I believe, towards doing something within that reserve. I think the original proposal went to the last long-term plan, and it didn't make it in the last long-term plan, and the board then allocated 9,000 or something along those lines towards trying to create something which is better for walkers to be able to walk their dogs within that reserve, but didn't go as far as actually creating a dog park within that reserve. I understand that the board is still looking for something a little bit more. They're still wanting a dog park in that reserve. The cost of a dog park in that reserve is going to be $100,000 plus, between $100,000 and $200,000. So if the council is going to look seriously at providing that as part of its long-term plan, then the board's general landscaping budget won't be sufficient to be able to do that. So it's likely that the council would have to supply funding outside of the general landscaping budget, and the general landscaping budget would then be available again. The board could choose to do something intermediate, but that's already been considered, I guess, and considered that extra funding for something more substantial from the council is required.
Sorry.
Oh, yes, Chris, do we have an update on the Mandeville Village car parking situation? And the landscaping associated with the car parking that was proposed earlier this year, do we have a plan of such a landscape?
So the same question was actually asked by Councillor Mealings as part of the annual plan process as well. I was actually surprised that it wasn't done, to be fair. I think before COVID-19 hit, there was plans in place to go down and actually put the bollards in and complete the work, which was identified. That got put on hold, and Grant McLeod, who's the Green Space Manager, has got that on his agenda again to make sure that it happens quickly.
Thank you. Just about the West Reserve toilets that were proposed. It was in the budget, then it wasn't, and it sounds like you'd like to actually put it back in. I think we actually need a robust discussion about that, because is it the right place to put toilets with no potable water, and the sewage has to be sucked out and etc. So I really think it needs to be closely looked at, because it's going to cost a lot of money in the future to service that area.
So the money was in the budget, and the money was, I can't recall exactly, 125, yeah, and that was actually only part funding. So we were looking at getting money through the Tourism Infrastructure Fund in round 4 as an application to part fund that. The Tourism Infrastructure Fund didn't put out their round 4. They closed round 4 because of COVID-19, and therefore we weren't able to get that additional funding. So we've actually pushed out that funding not into next year, but into the year following, into the 21-22 financial year. But we have indicated to council that if the tourism infrastructure funding becomes available again, we will be coming back to council and asking for that money to be brought forward to take advantage of that external funding. In terms of providing toilets in areas like that, we've done one recently using tourism infrastructure funding at Saltwater Creek on Main North Road. It doesn't have power, it doesn't have water, and it has a sewage getting sucked out, similar to what we'd be proposing at West Oxford Reserve. It's been very successful. The cost of sucking out is relatively small, based on the fact that we have a number of toilets with that system, which we have a contract for right throughout the district. Another example would be Pegasus Beach Toilet, which has water but no power, and also septic tanks which need to get sucked out as well. And some of the other ones which you would actually think would be connected to mains have a 2-tank system, which sometimes requires it to be sucked out in high use times as well. So the cost is actually relatively small in terms of servicing those toilets. And if we can leverage the government for some funding through the Tourism Infrastructure Fund, we believe that that's a sensible thing to do. And it was identified as part of our toilet facilities, public toilets strategy, which we presented as part of the last long-term plan and consulted with the boards on at the time.
I didn't actually have my hand raised, but it's probably a good opportunity to ask. Is it not more appropriate? Will we have the report sent through probably in time for our next meeting from the annual plan deliberations? Because I'm looking at the submissions and officers' comments thing in Diligent here, and I know we've made a few changes in those along the way, so it probably isn't really appropriate to comment on them at the moment, but I would imagine that the results of our submission will be put through so we can read next month. And then we won't be guessing. Would that be okay?
Through you, Mr. Chairperson, yes, after the annual plan is approved in, I think, the 15th of June or the 16th of June, we will get a letter on our submission answering the council response to our submission, and that will go into the July agenda of the community board and for the community board to consider.
Just to comment on the barbecue at Ashley Gorge, it's my understanding that even if the board decided to commit all its funding to a barbecue, we still couldn't afford it. That we were, well, I'm the Ashley Gorge Advisory Group representative, and they were under the understanding that it's sort of like a $20,000 project. But yeah, and we only have 13, so I don't know how that works, but.
Sorry, you're all looking at me, but it wasn't a question. It was a comment. I guess I can comment back. The Ashley Gorge Reserve Advisory Group are extremely good at fundraising. They have done in the past and shown that they're really good in that space. And if the board was inclined to give them a portion of its general landscaping budget, they could use that towards as a contribution towards the funding for a barbecue in the reserve and look to do external fundraising as well. So you're right, it's not likely to cover the full cost, but it would be a contribution to get them along the way.
Right. We've had the motion, we vote on it. All in favour that we ratify our board submission to the annual plan? All in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Now we're on to item 7.3, ratification of the BARD submission.
Oh, sorry.
To the draft annual plan, Environment Canterbury's draft annual plan. And somebody move that we ratify that submission, please. Mark, thank you. Seconder, Thomas. Any discussion? Goodness. Okay, all in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Moving on to correspondence. Have we any correspondence? No correspondence. Chairperson's report. I've got 3 items here. Presented submission to the draft annual plan for the council via Zoom. I attended 2 North Canterbury neighbourhood support meetings. When nothing much really happened. And outside of that, I've spent a lot of time contacting members of a Probus club that I belong to by weekly phone calls during the lockdown, just to keep them informed because we can't have meetings once a month. That's it from me at this point. Matters for information, 10.1, 10.2, 10.3. Somebody move that we receive those items? Shirley? Wendy? All in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Members' information exchange. Okay. Can somebody move that we receive the chairperson's report, please? Wendy, thank you. Nikki, all in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Now we'll move on to members' information exchange. Starting with Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As advised to other members on our Zoom catch-up, I think I will update you on the outcome of the West End and Summerhill Points Road proposal. That's gone back now to council staff and the Points Road people for the time being. My only other activity has been with the Mandeville Sports Club. Attended one of their meetings recently. I probably think the major output from that meeting was a funding for stage 3 of the strategic plan has been declined, so the board's going to fund stage 3 itself, and the board members are just providing feedback on stage 1 and 2 to go back to the author of the report. They're going to meet with the board at probably I think at the next meeting where we will press on into stage 3 and try and get a final draft report for consideration.
I don't think any of my usual committees have been running at this stage. The one thing I have been doing a bit of work on is the dam proposal for Northia Road. I've done quite a bit of looking into that and have been talking to Wendy and also to ECAN. It seems to be, is this my time to talk about this in general, or should I just not? Okay, it seems to be a proposal that is coming in a very fragmented way. So there's 2 resource consents that have already been issued from ECAN, which are historical. So I think they're probably from about 2014 for the ability to change the waterway and access the water. It's Waimak Irrigation Limited that is providing the water for the dam. So those consents have already been given. The consent that's under being looked at the moment is the consent to be able to put the dam on top of an aquifer, which seems to be that they've been able to tick the boxes to that. I don't think that's been passed as yet, but it sounds like it's probably going to be passed. From what I could hear from the lady that was doing the consent through ECAN, I think if this had been put forward as a proposal all at once, it may not have got through. But because it's so fragmented and bits of it have already been approved, and it's also under resource consents from Waimak Irrigation Limited as to what is happening with the water on that farm and any ramifications of that or any environmental concerns that may cause under Waimak Irrigation Limited's resource consents. So there's no resource consent specific to this actual dam that has would provide any information of what impact it may have on any groundwater or any waterways in the area. And then the council then has consents, like the Waimak Council, for the hazard control as to the flood possibility of it causing a flood if it breached. The information in the report is quite minimal for that. It's at a breach on a sunny day and a breach on the eastern side, on the western side of the dam. So all in very favourable locations and conditions for a breach, rather than looking at the worst case scenario. I think that the council obviously are very aware of that, and the engineers will be asking more questions about that. And they also, the consent for the earthworks. Obviously, the council's above ground. So from what I can gather, the council was asking for more information from the people that are applying for the resource consent, but because of the whole situation and how the project actually has been brought to the table, it's in so many different pieces and so many different parts that the whole project itself isn't really being looked at, and then is being classed as a minor, so it won't be publicly notified. So there's quite a few issues, I think, in the process. I mean, it very well could be a great project in something that does better for our environment, but who knows, because no information is provided. And the other thing that I had that sort of rang to me is, because the resource consents in projects like this can go to the council and go to ECAN, and ECAN can pass all these resource consents before we even get to hear about it through getting knowledge from the resource consent from the council. Would everyone like to be involved in, well, it would like to be on the email contact list for receiving ECAN emails? Because it sounds like they would be more than willing to put us on the email list to receive their resource consents. So if that, I just wanted to make sure everyone wanted to be involved in that. And if that's the case, I can ring up the lady who I have the number for and talk to her about it and just see if we can be added to the outgoing mail of their resource consents. And then we can pick up on things like this project if it came through, and maybe be able to do something before it's too late. So I guess my question is there anyone that would object to being on that email list? Once everyone's happy to be on it, because I can just give it, obviously, our bulk email. And yeah, I haven't heard anything more back. I sent the email that you all received through to Tia, and Tia, you sent that on. I haven't heard back from anyone about that at this stage.
Sarah, I've got a question. Is this on flat land?
I guess you could say yes, it's flatland. It's in Swananoa, so it's just up. It's on Northia Road, probably about 5 k's up from the tram road intersection, 5.5 k's up there. That's where it's located. So, but any land's always sloping towards the sea. So any groundwater or any contamination is going to be downward of that, and they're from pretty much the very end boundary of farms of where your lifestyle blocks all start. So there are an awful lot of private wells downstream of their irrigation areas.
And the other question I've got is, how high are the walls of this? I would call it a pond rather than a dam.
It's not anything like the Waimak Irrigation Limited's dam, what they're proposing. I think that it's still an extremely large amount of water. It's 180 something thousand cubic meters of water that it holds, and I think it's 3 meters high, the dam. It's a bit higher. So
Right, thank you for that. Moving on, Shirley.
Thank you. I attended the Waimakariri Access Group in March. Some of them were concerned about the new signage law because there's a lack of monitoring from the council staff. There's still a lot of challenges on footpaths for the disabled, people that can't see very well, etc. They're concerned that the new businesses aren't getting requirements of what is actually needed as far as the disabled, etc. And the Kaiapoi riverbank steps were actually one mentioned, and I know when I went on that boat ride, they were hard to actually see because I do have a sight problem. And we were told that e-scooters were to be introduced in Rangiora. So I don't know if there's going to be a new clause in the bylaw. I'm sure they'll look. Carl from Roading Staff advised us that the national speed limits are going to be looked at, and so that is really about the main street in Oxford, but whether that's going to be a long time or not. I attended the draft annual plan thing at Fresh Choice, and Wendy will say that I think we had about 3 people that actually came and actually spoke about the district plan. Yeah, and Doug, I did listen to your submission, and I thought you did quite well for the draft plan, so that's fine. Yeah, I actually got contacted by one of the people of Oxford regarding the Accessible Streets Regulatory Package. So I read through that, and I actually did a personal submission because you know, they will allow cyclists and you know, e-scooters and all sorts of things on footpaths in the future. I don't know where Rangiora will be, but no noise warning devices, and they can speed up to 15 kilometres an hour. And so that is the reason why you actually got the council's submission to that regulatory package, and I thought the council did a very good submission on that. I did listen to some of the deliberations, and the audio was absolutely shocking you couldn't hear. It was, but what I'm concerned about is you didn't finish the deliberations till the 27th, and there's a media release come out at 4 o'clock the day before. Bad management, I'd say, on the council. Yeah, and I also contacted the groups that I'm involved with, View Hill Advisory Group. Evidently that's in recess. That's what they said. I don't know, but there's a couple of matters, and I've been out and I don't know whether it comes under the landscaping budget or not, but there's 3 trees dead along the front of the reserve inside the fence, and they would like that. You know, these 2 members would like those replaced if they can. So whether it comes out of our landscape or what, I don't know. And also when they have, you know, pony club things there, the water tank is not big enough, and it is quite a small tank. There's not enough water to flush the toilets, etc. when there's a few people there. So I don't know whether that needs to be looked at. Pearson Park Advisory Group, that old fence is still up. And I don't know, with the current environment of trying to save money, health and safety, why can't a club or something remove that and get a bit of funding for it rather than pay big dollars? And regarding the composting site in Diversion Road, there are still smells coming out of it, but the only person who smells them is the nearest house, but they're keeping a record of all of those. There's lots of trucks coming and going, but they believe that it is the mature compost coming out of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Shirley. Ray.
I've been fairly quiet under lockdown, but there's just a couple of things. I'd like to support Sarah with the prospect of getting resource consent applications sent through from ECAN. And just a quick question, does the Waimakariri District Council receive copies of all of those? Or is it something that ECAN would need to be approached directly? Secondly, the General Landscaping Fund, could we look at using part of that for landscaping of the Mandeville Village car park? And has there been a plan done for the landscaping of that area? I understand that it's not in the annual plan, but perhaps that if there is a plan that has been done by Green Spaces, could we look at using part of that for that? And lastly, the Oxford main road, there was an email that I received late today about a national funding for improving the safety of that. Is that something that we can talk about today, or is that on a future agenda?
It is you're talking about the memo that was sent out this afternoon by Vanessa that I forwarded you from Vanessa Thompson. I was actually hoping that we can have a workshop or a Zoom workshop in a bit later, just to give members a time to actually read the memo, because it went out about 4:15 this afternoon about the funding. If that is okay with you, Mr. Chairman.
Right. That you need more answers than that?
It's definitely a possibility. The green space budget was going to pay for a little bit of tree work and the entrance into the car park, and then the bollards around the area, which was going to be identified for car parking. There wasn't any budget to pay for any additional landscaping, which would look at potential picnic tables and possibly some gardens in the reserve. So those are the things which the board could look to put their general landscaping budget towards if they decided that was where they wanted to put that money. We'd be happy to come back to the board with a landscape plan which looked at a little bit extra than the bare minimum that the green space budget was going to provide, if the board would like us to do that.
Can I just ask, weren't there picnic tables talked about a wee while ago?
Yeah, you're right, James did have some, so oh, that's wonderful. We didn't have any extra money for any additional landscaping, so if the board would like us to come back, then we'd be happy to do that.
Can I please just ask Chris the question, please? Chris, up in Oxford, where you've done all that work into by the tree, and also going into the car park area, that new car park area. Though there's nothing being done there for the gardens, so is that going to be done, or because that's something that we also need to deal with? It's just hollows there at the moment. You're coming up, aren't you coming up to see me some stage to have a look around? Yeah, yeah. So I just would like a little bit of information before the next meeting, please. Okay.
Yeah, I wasn't aware that there were empty gardens sitting there. Now's the right time to plant them. So yeah, when I come up and see you, we'll have a look at those, and if we'll plant them straight away if they're sitting there. Sure. Sure. Yeah, look, I wasn't aware of that. So I'm writing a list here of things that I need to get back to various people, including yourself, Shirley, in regards to the trees, which you said had died and need to be replaced. So we'll get someone to contact you regarding those, because we do have budget to replace trees on council reserves which have died. That's in our replacement budgets. So I'll get someone to contact you about that specifically as well.
Thomas.
Just a quick question again to Chris. There is an application in for resource consent to subdivide the land on the east side of the Mandeville Village, with the intention that the owner of the Mandeville Village would purchase that extra bit of land. During this stage, is there any opportunity to be able to have an indication of car parking, or is it just simply a subdivision request from the current owner?
I don't know the details of that, sorry. If they can subdivide the land. If they want to use it for the purpose of extending the village, they'd have to get a zone change, and if they were to do that, there'd be a public process to go through. But They would also have to identify an appropriate number of car parks to service the village in any new area that they were to develop as business. And the council would be looking at that very carefully to ensure that there were the appropriate number of car parks to service any new business in there.
Thomas.
Thanks, Doug. I think our area has maintained its community spirit throughout the whole lockdown. I know everyone that I spoke to whenever I was out and about walking, everyone was really cheerful and optimistic. I've been quite busy with the Community Trust, working with them. They've been running their food bank at an increased level to normal. And they've also been supplying essential workers with childcare, which has been funded by Rangatamariki. So that's there was quite a bit of heated debate from a few people about the whole process, but it was quite labour intensive, and it was basically meant one childcare worker to one family for 4 weeks, basically a live-in childcare worker. So that was quite time consuming organising that for Joe and her team. And they've also been running their normal medical transporting services, and as well as continuing their normal community work just remotely via the phone. I know Joe's been struggling with just the fact that everything is on over the phone now, and if you do have a client, it's very difficult to work with them and the various services that they need. But I think this is going to be a sort of the environment that we're in for a long time, so I think we better get used to it in some respects. The Fresh Choice has been delivering groceries to vulnerable people in the community, which has been really good, and I know lots of the community is very thankful for that. And I just think in general, most people are quite appreciative of the measures taken, and I think everyone's starting to look to get back to normal now. But there was one thing that's been brought to my attention, and it's the lights in the gym car park in Oxford. The new owner of the Fru's old house, now that the trees have all lost their leaves, there are 3 massive floodlights in the car park which actually shine right into his bedroom at night. And they run all night, even when the gym was closed over lockdown. So I was wondering if there's any way we could have a report on that, and if there'd be any option to maybe putting a timer on them so 2 of them turned off after 10 o'clock when the gym closed, or I don't know, it just seems a bit ridiculous that there are these 3 humongous fog lights that are running 24/7, but yeah, it's something that we need to look at in the future, I think.
No, only other than to say that I'll definitely look into it. The lights have been put there because of security reasons in the past. We've been asked to put lights in lots of places around Pearson Park and all of those facilities for security reasons in the past. And there's always a fine balance between providing security and also providing nuisance to residential properties. So there's lots of things that can be done in terms of we can put screens on the lights, we can put timers on the lights. There's things that we can do. So we'll look into that. We don't want to.
To be honest, all it would take is tilt them down. It's actually like shining flat like that right out of the screen, so they're not even really lighting up the car park.
Yeah, and look, LED lights as well these days they don't have much in the way of light spill. They light generally what they're pointing at, so we might be able to change the bulbs as well. So I'll get that looked into and make sure that we can do what we can, the best we can do. Happy to, if you pass on the details of the person who's affected, we're happy to contact them and talk to them as well.
Chris, we just probably need to clarify with the police as well, because I know that those lights were out there for the reason to pick up car number plates. So we just need to make sure that it's going to, because all that area has all been under surveillance by the police at any rate. So just don't want to, whatever we do, we don't want to just stop.
Right, councillors. Wendy, Nikki, which one goes first?
Well, of course, the life has been quite different for the last good while, and I've been one of those ones that have been made to stay home. I might add, I've been quite happy about doing that, and I just loved Zoom meetings. Very much loved them, because you could all get all tidied up, and once you've had your meeting, then you can go back and do what you're doing instead of doing a 30-something or other K home trip. So it was great, all hanging around here for another meeting. But at any rate, so I really appreciate all the Zoom meetings that we've had. It's been very helpful indeed. And I also appreciate, Chris, and I'm saying this to you, I really appreciate the regular contacts with the managers, keeping them up to date with everything that's happened, because when you're at home, you actually do lose track of what's happening. Because you're not out and about. So I very much appreciate that too. We've had 2 days with the annual plan. That was full on, and a lot of work. And of course, unfortunately, we haven't been able to do everything for everybody, because we've had to drop the rates down to 1.5. So there's a lot of stuff that's not going to happen this next year. And it'll be a little bit of a catching up process for road. Now, we had a utilities and roading meeting by Zoom, and that was very successful. We talked quite at length about the road, the Southbrook Road, for the walking and cycling, and Flaxton Road it is, and the update of the road to be done, which a lot of people from Oxford-Ohoka and such like will be using that part of the road quite often. So it'd be good to get that tidied up, and some places where people can walk and cycle. While I've been allowed to get out only a little bit, I've travelled around. I've walked Oxford and had a good look around at most things around, and like Thomas, it was very nice and pleasant. Everybody was talking, everybody was in good humour, and it was actually a very tranquil area, and really it was lovely to see people. But unfortunately, we had just 1 or 2 people that had doggies that didn't believe in picking up their doggy doos, which is a shame, because a lot of them did. And also I've went and had a look around various roads now that I'm allowed to be out a bit more, and went and had a look at Fords, and the Downs Road one. I had a look at that because I had someone come and ring me up about it. Next week we've got a road safety meeting by Zoom, and I'm just wondering if anybody's got anything that they want me to bring up at road safety. You can just let me know around your area if there's anything else. I don't know who's going to be on the Zoom this time, but I'm hoping that they all will come to be on the Zoom. I've had someone come to the door today complaining about boy races that have been coming around doing the circuit round from Starvation Hill and coming down, and of course Bay Road is like that, and they just hit that and down, and it's shingle road. So he had to talk to the police, and the police said to go and see Wendy. So I will take that to road safety. And likewise, we know we've got another one of these issues where people decide just to put a fence in where they shouldn't ought to put a fence in. Well, it actually had the legal right to put a fence in, so that the staff are trying to deal with this particular person to come to some arrangement that the post in the middle of a tar seal road isn't actually really acceptable. But anyway, it's on their land. So that's us. Things that people do during that lockdown. Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose since the last time we met on Zoom, I've just tried to capture a few items of interest since the last time we all chatted without going over old ground. But yeah, it's been a very busy time for council with the annual plan deliberations and whatnot. I've also been involved throughout with the community team's local welfare committee. with my lifestyle block hat on. And yeah, we really have a great team of people looking after our people, and they've been very, very busy and working very hard. Trying to find the page here, but I know there was 150% increase of food parcels going out from the Kaiapoi Food Bank. But that said, from Kaiapoi Community Support, yeah, that said, I think that people in our ward have fared pretty well, except, I have spoken to some people that, there's anecdotal evidence in a few areas where there's some widespread job loss, and it's something that we're very concerned about, because the people that are losing their jobs right now have never been in this place before, and they don't know how to access help. So I would ask you all to please keep your ears to the ground for anybody that that finds themselves in that unfamiliar territory, so we can direct them to the safety nets, because they are out there. I think that's really important for us as grassroots people, as a community board, that we do listen out and watch, so that we can make sure that our folks don't fall between the cracks. We have 5 new Waimak Youth Council members that have just been inducted, 2 from Rangiora High School and 3 from Kaiapoi, one of which is from Ohoka. So that's kind of exciting. They're looking forward to getting into it, and we will be getting some turning up at our meetings due to Thomas's very good suggestion, I think. As you would all be aware, with the annual plan deliberations, we did manage through a whole lot of scrimping and saving and cutting and slashing to get down to 1.5% overall, which I think is a really good result for us. But as we were going through those deliberations, I did pay careful attention to keep my ear out for things that we would think were pertinent. For instance, we've already talked about the Points Road scheme, which Mark has updated you guys about, but the Mandeville drainage projects, the Weatherfield lane improvements have been deferred to 2021. So I guess they were supposed to have been done in 1920. But so they're on the board for 2021. The Mandeville Resurgence Divergent Upgrade stays in 21-22 for design, with construction in 22-23. And as Chris has already pointed out, the Mandeville Village Reserve improvements should be underway, so that's good news. And let's see here. The loose deer, if you guys know about the deer, yes. Well, I've finally found out where those deer belong. Had a quiet word to our animal control, and have given the guy a little bit of grace to get the animals back in and fix the fences. Otherwise, we know whose door to knock on now, after 5 months, 6 months of chasing them down. So I'm happy about that. We have spoken to a couple constituents about various concerns, which hopefully have come to some happy endings. And let's see. And a pat on the back for all of the Ohoka, Swannanoa, Mandeville recycling customers. We are the stars of the recycle bins. We've got the cleanest recycling of the district, so pat on the back, everybody. That's something that's really important, that people need to make sure that they do that properly, or it's a use it or lose it thing, and it saves us, it not only saves us money, it saves ratepayers money, but it's also good for the environment. It's the right thing to do, so keep up the good work. And without boring you all too much more, I think I will leave it at that. Thanks, guys. Any questions?
Thank you for that, Nikki and Wendy. Right, moving on, consultation projects, there are none. Board funding update. The board discretionary grant before tonight stood at $4,058. The general landscaping budget is at $13,490. We have as Chris pointed out, elected not to have a landscaping budget amount for next year, but we retain this year's. And with the discretionary grant, do we keep that over, or does it go back? Do we lose it?
Do you mean the $2,000 that we've got left over after tonight?
What's left after?
Yeah, hopefully we can carry that over. I will actually confirm that with finance and report back to the board as soon as I have an answer of them, but usually it is carried over, yes.
Mr. Chair, do you wish us to do a move that we request that landscaping, I mean the budget be held over for the following year? Or do we need to do that, or do we not? Yeah.
It's your idea. You can put the motion.
Through you, Mr. Chairperson, at the next board, at July, at the beginning of the next financial year, there's usually a report that comes to the board with the balance and to say if it's going to be carried over or not carried over. That as well as confirmation of the landscaping grant. So I don't think there's a need actually now to move for it to be carried over.
Thank you. It's just that we do want to make sure that we stay, because that's only because we haven't really been handing it out simply because of COVID-19 that we're actually in this situation, because usually we've got everything spent. So, and I just think it's really valuable for our communities if we can hold it.
Thank you, Wendy. Media items, there are none. Now we're on to matters to be considered with the public excluded.
Mr. Chairperson, may I please make a suggestion that we move this to the end of the agenda, so because this does not get live streamed, so that we can actually finish the live stream portion of the agenda and then attend to everything that's not live streamed.
So move on to item 16 as questions under standing orders. There are none. Urgent general business under standing orders, there are also none. And I guess that's next meeting will be Wednesday, July the 8th at 7 p.m. Venue to be announced. And at that point, I will close the meeting.